Welcome everyone to Authors Bantering, the weekly show where I, Josh Bresslin, and Ian M. Rogers discuss writing topics. This week we're going over theme and how to convey it. I think for some people, even myself included, this tends to be one of the hardest aspects of the writing process. Like, you have this idea, this concept that you want to show, that you want to convey in your work, and you decide to write a whole novel, perhaps to really show this. How do you do it, right? How do you manage to show it? And so I like to do, there's an old analogy I find that works well. It's called C to C,
Hmm.
concrete to concept. And what that means basically is that the theme is your concept, what you're trying to show, and how you do it is through concrete examples of your writing. And that the more concrete your work is, the more you can show concepts. So, as an example, let's say I want to do a novel about, say, rural poverty, right? The theme of the story basically is to show this kind of idea of what rural poverty and people living in desperation might be like. The way to convey this idea is through concept and then going from concrete to that concept. So we have the concept of the theme of the rural poverty. The solution is to be very concrete, so use examples. So to write, a scene where maybe you have, like, maybe someone's driving through town and they see like a mill building that's closed down now, right? Or they hear that maybe they're in a tavern and they hear about how half the workforce in town was laid off because maybe some lumber plant closed down. If you're up here in New Hampshire, maybe you have some descriptions of perhaps drug use, or of physical descriptions basically of kind of these run down buildings, these aging buildings that have not been repaired. That's how you can kind of convey the theme of the idea that you're trying to show, right? If you're trying to show poverty and desperation. I think just if you can always think of being very solid with your descriptions of it and display of it, you can always go very, very far and start showing examples of it. I'm not sure about you, Ian, but that tends
No,
to be how
this
I
is
think of it.
I really like your way of summing that up, and I really like how you cited a lot of different examples
Yeah.
of something. Some examples were things that characters were maybe talk about that occurred off screen. Some of them sound like there are things that the characters would experience right there. And then other things seem like they're just different aspects of how the story works.
Yeah.
I, I think that one when we're talking about theme, I think that use the word examples plural with an S. The
Yeah.
idea that you have to show more than one instance of this type of thing. You can't just have like, well, the lumber mill closed down and workers got laid off. There, I've conveyed my theme.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
Right.
Ridiculous. You something like that. I mean, it can be an incident or an aspect or something that happens in the novel, but if you're showing all of these different aspects of your theme or different instances of your theme or different examples of your theme, they'll layer together in a really interesting way, and they'll add up, and the reader will remember them in a way that creates the theme through all of these examples plural. I think
Exactly.
is very important.
And I think you can, often starting small and then building out is much better. Like, rather to have that example there, just have someone. If you had someone just driving through at night and it was kind of, and you just happen to show like that one mill building that's kind of starting to wane, that'll stand out. Like, you'll remember that and you'll go, oh, okay, so that building there is starting to wane. Or if someone's in a bar and they hear someone over talking about how, hey, I'm been laid off, whatever, the plant's laid off, right? If you hear that just as a passing thing and there's nothing else that happens in that scene, that that puts the clue already in the person's head, the reader's head, that, hey, something's going on here. And yes, you need to later on go over, but you don't have to throw everything at it right away. You can be very,
Yes.
very, very sparing, and I think you should be somewhat sparing in the beginning, and then slowly expand this idea more and more. Um,
Yes, I think that one mistake that a lot of writers make is to be too heavy-handed with themes and
okay.
take, something that is maybe just could be a mention or, some aspect, and to really just spend too much time with it on the page.
Mm-hmm.
Have it be a paragraph instead of a sentence, or have,
Yes.
characters make long speeches about something, like, oh, it's so terrible when the lumber mill closed down and now everyone's lost their jobs, and, the poverty is up, and, it's, people can't live, this, I'm exaggerating a bit, but I think sometimes we can be so afraid about making sure that the reader understands our theme or understands what we're trying to say, is that we will just put more of it on the page.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's definitely something where you don't need a sledgehammer. You need just a small little tool, basically, to hint it in there.
Yes.
And again, much as we talked about before about implication, when you work within the idea of implication in your writing, it will show through. Your readers can
Yes.
read between the lines, oftentimes.
Yes, readers are smart.
They
Readers are
are.
smart. They know how to pick up on this kind of thing, especially if you're dropping in multiple of these instances, and it's
Exactly.
not just the one. If it's only
Yeah.
one, they might miss it, or they
Mhm.
probably will miss it. But if it's multiple, they'll pick up on enough of them to understand what you're going for with this theme.
I think you're right. Yeah, I tend to be someone that always tends to kind of. I tend to hold back a little bit. I almost don't perhaps don't show enough at times too. So I'm someone that definitely does err on the side of caution, for exactly kind of what you just said there, right? The reader's not a moron. You don't want to bog it down, right? Some theme that's so overly shown and with so many examples, it's a lecture. It's not a theme. It's a lecture, right?
Yes, yes, yes,
Like
yes, yes, yes. That's a mistake I
that's
always
modern Hollywood
make.
right there, basically. I mean,
Well, no, this is well. I
that's its
think we
whole
can
thing,
all
but
think of a few
yeah.
examples of that. But I think back to, when I was first starting to write more seriously, and, the idea of theme was very exciting to me, and the
Hmm.
idea that stories that could have meaning behind them, or that can
Yeah.
impart, wisdom, or about the way the world worked. And I was really excited to do this myself, and I was so excited that I would, not only write these long paragraphs, but often it was in the form of speeches,
Yes.
where a character would impart the theme, through dialogue, and or would talk about the theme, or the narrator would say, and then we learned that blah 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 blah, and, we all learned a lesson, or whatever, and it would come
Hmm.
across as very, very heavy handed.
Yeah.
I think because the theme was very exciting to me, I had thought about it a lot, and I wanted to make sure that readers got it.
Hmm.
So again, if you're looking to develop your own writing, and you're, seeing yourself doing this, you might, err on the side of having a little bit less. That being said, I think it's possible to try to put theme into a work, but maybe not have enough of it so that it just goes over readers' heads. I think that's the opposite extreme.
Hmm.
If you're talking to somebody about your book, and, they didn't pick up on the rural poverty aspects at all, and they were like, wait a minute, like the people here aren't doing so well, or they didn't pick up on, whatever your theme is, it's probably a sign that you, one, didn't put enough instances in,
Yep.
or two, the instances that you have are maybe buried, or not expressed clearly, or not consistent, or
They don't hold any kind
the
of
descriptions
resonance.
aren't. Yes, yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes. They're not. Yeah, they're not doing that heavy lifting that you want them to be.
Yeah. You should have been more selective in what you decided to show, so that way they stuck out. Yeah. No, I agree
Yes.
with you. And I think with that, it's a balance thing, and what will help you a lot if you're trying to show theme in your work is critique partners. To be honest, kind of what you were just saying there, where you want to have people read it through and just see if they pick up on it. Like, do you pick up on this idea? And there are times that I think theme show will show through work that you haven't even thought of. Like there are times I've written
Yeah.
works, and people
Yeah.
people have, like, there was a short story I just finished up not too long ago. My critique partner had said to me, I get the feeling of claustrophobia and the feeling of being trapped in the
Mm,
story. It's awesome. And I was like, I wasn't really going for that, but the character is pretty desperate, and I look back, I'm like,
mm.
oh wow, yeah, it's a good point. So I kind of played it off like, yeah, I was doing that all along. In essence, yeah, in essence, what happens basically is you work on this other thing here, and it's a similar idea and concept, but it shows
Well,
through, but people pick up on it much more than you might.
well, okay. I laughed about the, I was doing it all along theme, but in a way, you kind of were, because you may not have sat down and planned out the claustrophobia aspect, but something that you did
Hmm.
unconsciously, or through trying to set up other parts of the story, gave the reader this claustrophobic feeling.
Yeah.
So in a way, you did do it.
Mm.
It wasn't part of the plan necessarily, but it's an example. The claustrophobia example is an instance of a way that, in crafting a story that's complicated and complex and has a lot going on, different readers are going to pull different things from it.
Yeah.
And that's okay. I think that's really okay. And that doesn't get talked about often enough. The idea that different readers are going to respond differently and pick things out, some of which you intended, some of which you didn't
Mm-hmm.
intend. But by listening to those readers, you can understand your own story better and understand the different elements that are at work in it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think the other thing too that comes out is when you start a story, if you don't necessarily have a theme right away, or if you start with one, basically you might find in later drafts that your message of your story or what you're trying to convey has changed.
Yes.
That you hadn't necessarily intended for this thing to be shown here. When you recognize it, bring it out. When you see that in your work,
Yes.
bring it out. A later draft, basically, that all of a sudden, oh wow, that's interesting. Yeah, that is a pretty interesting connection here between these two things that are happening. Okay, go with it. Go with it. The
Yes.
theme is something basically where if it shows up organically, just chase it the whole
Yes.
way, because it's difficult to show purposely, and when it comes through organically, it's amazing. Just bring it forth even more.
That's a really, really good point, actually. I think that theme is often the strongest when an author starts with the story first and then the theme emerges from it,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to a writer who says, okay, I want to write about friendship. All I need is some characters and a plot. It's
Yeah.
it's the idea that if you start with the theme, what comes out of it might feel very heavy-handed, almost like an Aesop's fable or something,
Yeah.
or something like that. It's too simple. But if you're working with the different story elements on their own, the plot, the characters, setting, even, then theme could emerge from that very, very naturally. And we talk a little bit about plotting versus pantsing. I think that if you're doing pantser type things, or you're experimenting on the page and seeing what comes out, theme might emerge very naturally from that. And
Yeah.
if you find yourself thinking about something a lot as you're writing the story, write it down. It's just make a note for yourself. The idea that, okay, this is an important aspects of the story. How can I go about putting more of this in?
Mm-hmm.
And not more as in a long paragraph, but maybe, if it's in chapter 2, put it in chapter 4, chapter 8, and chapter 17, and
Yep.
find different ways to make it a consistency in the
Bingo.
story.
No, agreed. And it's hard. I mean, to say anything else, basically, it is hard. Like, trying to convey theme in a story is probably the most difficult aspect of the story, at least for myself. Like, if I went in, told me show this thing, it would be, to do it purposely, it would feel very, very heavy hand, like you just said. A lot of times you need to go in basically more with, I think, less focus on theme. I don't know if you know this, but I tend to always go with just what my character wants, then trying to get him towards that, and then let theme kind of come through afterwards. But
Yes.
to try and do it, it is very difficult. So I always tell people, like, give yourself a lot of room to be understanding with yourself in this process, because that is probably the most difficult thing in the entire writing process.
I do. I think that, talk about plot, characters, setting, symbolism, even, the different elements of a story. I think theme is the most complex.
Mm-hmm.
One thing we haven't talked about yet is that the idea that a writer could be working on stories that didn't have enough theme, or didn't have consistent themes, or the themes weren't developed enough, or maybe the author, wasn't sure what those themes were.
Yeah.
And to an author like that, I might say, take a deeper look at your story and what the story's doing. And the themes are probably in there, but maybe you just aren't aware of them.
They might be.
Maybe it's just like with the claustrophobia example, where you're putting it in, but you couldn't necessarily, list it as a theme.
Yeah, in that case, yes, go back and bring forth those things that tend to stick out, those moments that have resonance. Bring those out more, and I think there will be some theme shown within them. I think that you can find it if you bring it forth more. Yeah, if you don't have any kind of theme in your work, it's probably because it lacks direction as well. That could be the other thing too.
That's true. Yeah, that
could just be from the very start you didn't have a good direction to go with. You
That's
thought,
true. That's true.
yeah,
Not being able to identify a theme could be a sort of a symptom of a bigger fundamental problem in the work. The work isn't
right,
functioning well for another reason. It's just too long and unwieldy, or the plot isn't going in the right way, or there's a lot of dense prose that's interfering
yeah,
with something, or there's just not enough of something, or yeah, I think there's two reasons. One is that the themes are there, but the writer just needs to bring them out more, or just needs to be more aware of them. And then two, it's because of a bigger problem in the work
yep,
that the themes can't come through. So yeah,
yep,
thank you for bringing that up.
yeah, yeah. Um, wow, yeah. It's again, anyone that's having trouble with theme, I do not, I don't envy you at all, because that again, it's even a topic talking about today. Like this topic was still something I was kind of hesitant to go over, just because, man, it's been a challenge for me. I don't know how other people
Well,
face it, but
maybe it's because it's more abstract than plot or
it
characters.
it's hard to
And
diagnose. Yeah, it's because it's all encompassing. It's something that's all encompassing throughout your whole work, right? So that's what
yes,
makes it even more difficult.
yes.
Yeah. But with that, if you did enjoy this video, if you thought it was helpful, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe. We do this every Monday. And again, as always, we always try to take comments from the audience. So any kind of comments, anything subjects you want to be discussed, leave it in the comments, and we can maybe go over it. But with it though, I'm going to sign off here. This is Josh Breslin. That's Ian M. Rogers, and we will see you all next week.
Take it easy.